Looks like crude oil price stubbornly doesn't want to drop anywhere below $100. So is it a good idea to buy crude oil now? Are we going to see substantially higher prices above $120 over the next few weeks, or a correction is still likely? Welcome to myfinanceteacher.org. As I mentioned in the previous video on crude oil, there is perhaps 35% chance that we've seen the cycle low on crude oil at the end of April. Today I want to adjust that slightly upwards to perhaps a 40% chance as crude oil continues higher all the way since late April. But there is still a better chance of a bit of a correction in crude oil coming in the next several weeks to give us a more identifiable cycle low. Talking about these cycles, usually crude oil cycles last for around a half a year. More recently, since the middle of 2017, these cycles have lasted for slightly less than a half a year with an average of 163 days. And the cycle duration varies quite a lot, anywhere from 104 days only to 233 days. So with that in mind, the current cycle is 169 days. So either we have seen the cycle low at the end of April, again, I would only give it 40% chance, or with a 60% chance, with more conviction, I do expect a bit of a correction in crude oil perhaps over the next several weeks, perhaps into early or mid-June. After all, the previous cycle was pretty short, lasting only between second half of August and early December, so it's likely that the ongoing cycle is going to be a little bit longer than usual to bring the overall usual duration closer to that average. Looking at crude oil seasonality over the last 10-11 years since 2012, we see that, yes, usually summertime, the driving season, is when crude oil price spikes significantly, especially from April. So this adds a little bit to that 40% chance that we have actually seen the cycle low in late April. However, we often do see a bit of a cool down in crude oil price sometime into late May, early June. We see that over the last 10 years as well as since the 2015. So whichever combination of seasonality you look at, there is a bit of a cool down in crude oil prices sometime into early to mid-June. And with a recent crude oil spike all the way above $120, I think a bit of a correction down into the cycle low should be a little bit more severe than the correction that we've seen in late April. Especially and hopefully if we do see some peaceful development in Eastern Europe, that might actually bring crude oil prices significantly lower. Looking at crude oil optimism index, generally historically over the years, crude oil cycle lows are accompanied with optimism index down in the gutters somewhere around 30. As you know, it's time to buy when everyone is fearful, when there is no optimism left on the market. Over the last year and a half though, crude oil cycle lows came with this optimism index somewhere between 45 and 50 rather than 30. And in late April, this optimism index did drop down to 46, 47. So again, there is a 40% chance, I would say, that we have seen a cycle, meaning that crude oil is likely to ratchet higher over the next several weeks. But again, with the recent stretch in crude oil far above the averages, far above the 50-day and the 200-day moving average, above $120, I think the correction should be a little bit more significant, bringing this optimism index once again down to those mid-40 levels, perhaps even to lower 40s. So there is, in my opinion, still a 60% chance of a bit of a correction in crude oil over the next few weeks. But of course, nobody does know the future. I just look at the data here and try to share with you how I read the data. And again, as nobody does know the future, if you agree or disagree with the way I see the data, please share your opinion down in the comments below so that we can all learn from an exchange of ideas. Another chart you might want to have a look at is crude oil stocks, usually moving in opposite directions with crude oil price, although with a bit of a lead lag sometimes. So what we see over here is that over the last few weeks, looks like crude oil stocks might be gradually rising. So if this trend continues over the next few weeks, if the crude oil stocks move somewhere closer to late last year stocks around 430 million barrels, that again might actually help crude oil prices to cool down over the next few weeks. Next, looking at XLE, Energy Producers ETF. Again, there is perhaps a 40% chance that we've seen a bit of a cycle low over here in late April, but correction hasn't really been that significant in my opinion. Perhaps a 60% chance remains of one more correction down, at least to the bottom of the Bollinger Bands, which are widening at the moment. And looking at the distance from the 200-day moving average, it's now fluctuating around the 20% distance from that 200 DMA. And if you zoom out a little bit, it's quite a historic distance. Even when XLE was above 100 in mid-2014, even then this distance from the 200-day moving average wasn't as high as it is right now. So yes, energy might continue higher over the next few weeks if we have already seen the low in late April. But again, the risk of a stronger correction is still there. So perhaps if you are involved with energy, you might actually want to keep stop losses perhaps somewhere below that middle of the Bollinger Bands to prevent you from going down with a likely correction down into the cycle low. So that's my view on energy. If you found this video informative or maybe even interesting, I would appreciate it if you hit that like button and of course subscribe to the channel. Share your opinion on crude oil down in the comments below. Have a nice day and bye-bye.